Hello, welcome to the Scientific Writing Sessions podcast. I'm Sophie, a scientific writing mentor at Lancaster University's Learning Development team. In this podcast, I will talk to fellow mentors, students and academics about common writing problems and how to overcome them. We will also cover writing tips and tricks, good writing practices and common writing fears. A podcast aims to show how writing is a creative and lifelong and personal process for everyone. And today we're really lucky to have a very influential person in the learning development team, Louise, who's going to share her words of wisdom and her experiences of writing. Welcome, Louise.
Thanks, Sophie. I don't think I've got any words of wisdom. I'm not influential.
Today it's just going to be a few questions about your experiences of, writing, as you have a PhD, and you've also coached a lot of students on how to write as well. So I'm sure you'll have a lot to say. But firstly, the first question is, do you have a favourite writing setup? Do you get the chance to write much now?
So I'm quite rubbish, actually, at writing. I don't write probably as much as I should, but what I have discovered is that I cannot sit at my desk and write. So if I'm coming up with lecture slides or session slides, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to write, so the different types of things that I write, I can't actually sit at my desk because for some reason my desk is very generational, so I generate materials. But if I want to do the thinking and the writing, I have to go and sit somewhere else. And it's taken me a little bit of time to realise that, partly because my desk is incredibly cluttered, but also it's not the right space. So sometimes just having a blank table and just paper. So a blank table and paper and sitting upright, I can write and I can think about what do I need to put in this writing, and I'll maybe come up with draft notes, but I can't type directly into my laptop. I'll do it if I have to do it for boring reports for meetings and things, and I'll force myself. But if it's something where I really need to think, I really need the pen on paper and I need to not be sitting at my work desk. I've discovered that that's the only way I can really do it now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you think of writing like you just sit down and you write, but there's so much thinking that goes into it. So it sounds like you kind of need that space for thinking before you start.
I do, and I've also discovered that I talk to myself a lot. And I used to do it quite internally, but now I don't hear it, so I have to do it out loud. So I will maybe even sit in the room and I talk it out. But it's funny because I was thinking back to when I used to do presentations in my undergraduate degree, and I used to record myself on my tape deck because I'm old, and I used to record myself and then listen to it, record myself again, listen to it, and I think I do that talking out loud is where I have those ideas, and so I do look like a crazy lady walking around campus sometimes, and I'll just have to go for a walk, and I'll talk to myself, and I'll have that conversation with myself about, well, what actually do I want to say? What am I trying to say? And try and get through all the rubbish of, I've got to add this literature, that literature. That's not important. At the start, it's what am I trying to say? So I have to kind of create a blank space on the desk, and I have to create a blank space orally. So my previous boss here at Lancaster, in my previous role, Moira, she would often talk with students and with us as colleagues about how sometimes you get your best ideas when you take a break and you go and wash the dishes, and the minute you put your hands in the water, that's it. Then that's possibly when you start having those thoughts, and because you've cleared the space rather than put all that pressure on yourself about, I must do something, and having that blank space in your brain and you're doing something else, it feeds in. And so she used to talk about that. So I didn't quite believe her, but she's right.
Yeah, it's like kind of those shower thoughts as well, isn't it? It's like when you're doing something else, then the idea comes to you, doesn't it? Like,
exactly,
yeah. It's true, and it also normalises that writing isn't easy, and it's kind of a thing that maybe you do even write when you're not at your desk. You you think, oh, I haven't written much today, but maybe you've been thinking about it all day or something. So
yeah. I think it's very hard if you start thinking about words, and it's always the thing that students ask me about is how many words should each section be, and also there are those writing schemes about sit down and write 500 words a day or 1,000 words a day or whatever, and you can get too hung up on the numbers, and it's actually the ideas then allow you to write the words, and I think it can be, for some people it works really, really well, but I can't focus on the numbers.
Yeah.
I can't focus on that. I've got to generate. It's kind of like, okay, let it come, because if I force myself to do it, it won't happen. Or what will happen won't be very good at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, anyway. Maybe not for others.
And when did you learn all this about yourself? Was it quite recently, or was it?
It comes in phases. So my degree, it was only, I would say, halfway through my undergraduate degree, because I'm old, that we were required to submit assignments printed, typed up, yeah. So all of my writing up till that point was always handwritten, and I was very good with Tipex and things like that, and drafting. So I think because of that, I'm quite used to therefore using a pen and paper. And then I think for a while doing my PhD, it was a novelty typing it up, because email came in during my PhD and internet searching, like having the amount of things at your fingertips. So I think it was quite novel when I was doing my PhD, and I tried to do some of that generative writing on typing it on screen, and I could do some because it was quite novel, but then as time went on I realised more and more needed to be done by hand. And then I stepped away from my writing for quite a while, and then coming back to it, I've kind of reaffirmed what I knew. So it's kind of old knowledge, but then I've kind of forgotten it, and then I've come back to it.
Yeah.
And then I've realised, that actually someone else's efficiency of sitting and typing straight into screen doesn't actually work for me in terms of quality. So I've had to relearn. So
yeah. I think that's a really, there's this kind of image in films, isn't there? Like they're stressed about writing for ages, and then suddenly they write all night and they're typing furiously at a typewriter or something, and they've done it. But it's really not like that most of the time, is it?
I don't think it is. I think it's much more of a squiggly journey rather than a straight line.
Exactly. And do you have a favourite piece of writing? Can be academic or non-academic. Has there been anything that you really like?
So I was thinking about this morning, and I don't. So I'm quite rubbish at reading academic articles, and I should be better. But because I cover 8 departments in my day-to-day job, I read incredibly varied things.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was reading about Einstein's relativity equations.
Okay.
And the day before I was reading about autism and deception. And so what happens for me is I really enjoy what I'm reading, student work, but then I find I don't enjoy reading academic articles as much because I become not too critical, but I think about them either too deeply, or I'm thinking about them as is in the way like as a learning developer, and I'm quite rubbish. So in terms of writing, one of the things that I really like doing is I like reading poetry. And I had a look this morning, and I have about 35 poetry books.
Oh,
and if you'd asked me, I'd have said I've only got a couple. And then I started having a look around this morning, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've got quite a lot. And I think I quite like and it's not that I like short poems, I think I just like the imagery, and in some of them the brevity, and in some of them the joy, and some of them the despair. And so I quite like reading poetry, because you get taken away somewhere else. Yeah. And there's a lot happens in those sentences over a shortish period of time. It's only a few pages. So I really enjoy reading poetry, and I quite like that. You're not wading through chapters, or you're not wading through really difficult technical language. Though sometimes poetry can be. And I don't write poetry. I'm not that creative, but I do enjoy reading other people's poets.
Yeah. I suppose there's a level of emotion in poetry that isn't really conveyed in academic writing.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot less emotion in dissertations about Einstein's equations. And I guess that is quite a feature of scientific writing, unless it's a reflective piece, of course. It's that you don't necessarily have all that emotion. So maybe that's something, that's maybe a really good point. Maybe I quite like the emotion in the poetry. Yeah, possibly.
Do you have a favourite poet? Is that a horrible question? Or is there something that you particularly like at the moment that's speaking to you maybe? Or
yes, so there is a Scottish poet called Nan Shepherd. She was a novelist and a poet, and she's a modernist, and she also writes about a lot of nature. You might have come across her in that respect. She's also the image on the Scottish £5 note from the Royal Bank, and she was a teacher of English in Aberdeen Teacher Training College, and she in the last century sort of thing, and she writes in both English and in Scots, and she is really evocative about the landscape of the Cairngorms up in Aberdeenshire. I did my degree in Aberdeen, and she writes, her novels are about young women's struggles in the early 20th century, coming from rural backgrounds and then getting an education. And then she also wrote poetry, and I didn't really know much of her poetry. I watched a thing on BBC, and they'd set her poetry to some landscape, and it was Robert Macfarlane, who's a nature writer. He had kind of done this, and he and I didn't know her poetry, so I literally went and bought everything after that. And then one of the poems that really speaks to me it's called Achiltibuie, and it's a tiny, tiny little hamlet on the west coast of Scotland, 29 miles north of Ullapool along a single track road, and it overlooks the Summer Isles. It's the most beautiful place. You're looking out over the Atlantic, basically, and it's turquoise blue seas and gorgeous white beaches, powdery sand, absolutely lovely. And I didn't know she'd written a poem called Achiltibuie, and it's actually where my mum's ashes are scattered. And it was quite a surprise when I found this poem, and it actually really describes the place amazing. It's about where the land hits the sky and the light, and how you feel about being pulled between heaven and earth because the light is it's just amazing. It's very different to the light in Lancaster. So that's kind of, I've been reading a bit of Nan Shepherd recently, and it's really quite it's so evocative, and her the way she speaks about water and its properties and things like that. So probably her poetry at the moment.
That sounds lovely. Yeah.
It is. It was a surprise when I turned the page, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But then, I go through phases though.
No, that's
of the poetry that I like.
Yeah, I think that's it's common, isn't it? I think to go through that. Yeah. I think I come across it from Robert Macfarlane's way.
Yeah. It was a beautiful documentary. So it was lots of imagery of the Cairngorms, and when I did my undergraduate degree, we used to. They wouldn't let you do it now. They used to just let students in groups go off, and you had to walk for like 4 or 5 miles and find the source of a tributary of a river.
Wow, okay, yeah.
Unsupervised.
See you later, yeah.
Goodbye, we'll see you at 5 o'clock for the bus. And however long it takes you to get there, you've got to come back. And it was all that landscape, and I was like, well, that's really familiar because I did my degree up there. And that just kind of got me into her, and it was a collaboration with Robert Macfarlane, and he's written new introductions to her books, because she wrote The Living Mountain about Cairngorm as well.
Okay, yeah.
And so they're really amazing.
Oh, that's sounds lovely. Yeah,
lots of connections, but also really. Yeah, probably that's why I like it. It's got that wee scientific edge, but it's quite emotional as well.
Yeah, it kind of connects you to bigger things than yourself, I suppose, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. So I'd love to say I had a really good bit of academic writing. I do have horrific papers from a PhD that are stuck in my head, Beaver 94 and 97. They're the ones that I worked a lot with during my PhD, but, I wouldn't say they were great pieces.
Yeah. Perhaps my question should be, what's the worst piece of academic writing? I think that would probably generate a lot more emotion.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. And how do you generally feel about writing? Is it something you kind of hate, or, does it give you some joy? Or yeah, I don't know.
So academic writing, I think it depends on what I'm reading it for. And like when I ask students that, and ask staff that, it depends on what you're doing at the time, doesn't it? So I found writing my PhD incredibly difficult. And I had a supervisor who was really, we went through with everyone doing the writing. You're quite connected, and then you disconnect, and then you connect again. And there was one time when he took one of my chapters for my PhD. I wrote my thesis as a traditional chapter-based PhD, not as papers. It wasn't really the norm then. It was just coming in. And he took my chapter, was it 2 or 3? It was 3, on a train to York. And the train from Lancaster to York is a 2-and-a-bit-hour stopping train. And he did it in one colour on the way there, I think it was red, and then he wrote on it in green on the way back. And I basically got a green and red piece of chapter back. Yeah. And I was just devastated, and I thought I was a terrible writer. And it was all spelling mistakes, comma, you should have put this, you should have put that, I think you need to reword this. Basically, he was bored on the train.
Yeah, way too much time.
Way too much time. And we hadn't talked a lot about my writing till that point, and that was a really hard lesson. I found that really, really difficult. When I actually went through it, there wasn't anything bad. Some of it was rewording. Some of it was, I think you need to be stronger here. Your idea is great, but... And it was actually, a lot of it was quite positive, but I think I just had... It was too much feedback all at once.
Yeah.
So that kind of experience has scarred me a little bit.
I'm not surprised.
It scarred me a little bit. Because, we're talking a good 15-page chapter. To get that back was quite hard.
Yeah.
So when I'm writing now, I try and think about how I felt at that time with feedback. And actually, I turned out to have a really good thesis. That chapter got published as a paper, ultimately. So I kind of try and think of that feeling, think of that transformational process. And even if I'm not having a good experience with writing, it doesn't mean that it will always be bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there are sometimes I really like writing, and it depends what the intention is and who it's for.
Yeah.
I actually find it harder to share my writing with my colleagues and people I know. I don't know. I find it quite exposing, whereas I don't mind writing other stuff for other people that I don't really know very well.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah.
It's such a vulnerable process, isn't it, sharing your writing, I think.
I think so, yeah.
It has to be handled with care, I think, as well.
I think so, and even though, I say to students, it doesn't reflect you as a person, that's not how you feel when you're writing. And it doesn't help that we say, well, we want to hear your voice, and then we say, but it doesn't mean that we're criticising you. Although that is two separate things, when you hear that, it feels the same.
And I think people who sometimes give feedback can forget that this isn't, you're a person behind it, aren't you, right? Like it's, it can be a bit detached too, can't it? So,
And also, I think it depends, writing. So writing for my supervisor was very easy. So his PhD supervisor had been someone that people wrote to about their authority on Oxford commas. They were well known in kind of literary circles for their writing expertise, their scientific expertise, and they were friends with people in the Houses of Parliament, minor royalty, stuff like that. So my supervisor had quite an experience about writing, so he was quite keen.
Yeah.
Which was great. However, it was quite overwhelming. So I try, when I'm giving feedback, I try to be mindful of that as well. And I feel sorry for students because they get multiple types of feedback from multiple different people. And it doesn't matter if you're undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD student, if you've got competing supervisors who've got all their experiences, and you've got to temper that and process it as well, and that's quite challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you're sort of doing a lot of the patching up of people's writing, but also how they feel about it. So I feel sorry for students when you're in that position, because you're having to deal with it, take it on board, and find your voice. There's a lot going on. And develop some confidence out of something that's quite harsh.
And also, you know what you've done, and you know what the results are telling you, but you you might not be able to convey that in the best way because you've got all these competing voices and things. So no wonder writing's difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. I know. You've got to compete with yourself as well first, haven't you, with all the harsh feedback you can give yourself.
Well, I think we're our biggest critics, aren't we? We're our own biggest critics, and I think that's a hard thing too and also to get over the hurdle to share it with someone. I think that is quite difficult too. Even if it's someone you don't really know. So I'm quite impressed when students do come to like the Scientific Writing Centre, or they'll come and talk to me one-to-one, and they're happy to share their writing, because that's a hard thing to do.
It is, yeah. Especially with someone, I guess, you don't know will handle it with care. But I suppose that's good practice then, because if you do decide to publish papers, that's very hard, sending it off into the void. Yeah.
And then you don't know who's looking at it.
Yes,
you might guess who might be looking at it, but you're not sure.
And reviewers typically are very sensitive and careful with their comments, aren't they? So, Have you had any notable writing experiences that have shaped, I guess, your learning journey so far? With your job, you help a lot of students with their writing, and I don't know, it could also include that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose the most notable one was the thing that happened with my supervisor. I love when sometimes students will bring a piece of writing, and just by you working through it, they go, oh, this is terrible. I can see exactly what I need to do. Can we just stop reading this? And I'm going to go away and redo it.
Yeah.
And that's happened a couple of times for me, where I've been working with a student on that, and we've managed to get to a place where they've just taken complete ownership. So that happened a couple of years ago with a couple of psychology students that I had, and it was lovely seeing those epiphanies in the room with them, which was really, really nice. And then I've had a couple of, I wouldn't say negative experiences, that's not right. So I've had a couple of students, I can particularly think of one, where I worked with them for a long time and I didn't actually ever see any writing.
Okay.
But that student did finish their dissertation and got a good grade, but I never saw any writing.
Okay.
And it was more, we talked about what they were going to write or what they had written, but they never shared it with me. But because they were talking to me about it, it made them do it. And I suppose that ties back to what to that thing about sometimes you have to do a lot of thinking about your writing before you write, and that's kind of had a huge impact on the way I talk about learning development now. So I say it an awful lot these days. It's the one-to-ones are often that I do are often for holding space, and that's what I talk about in the writing centre as well. It's about holding space for students, because everyone's so busy submitting things online, getting online feedback, and it feels like an information overload for our undergraduate students. And sometimes I don't think they have pause, so they're jumping from one assessment to another while also trying to consume everything in lectures, watch it all again because it's online, so that means I won't miss a single fact, and then recompartmentalise and package that stuff up in an essay with some other stuff. And really over the last 2 or 3 years, I've kind of thought a lot more about holding that space for students, and that even if I don't see any writing, we are talking about their writing, and that might be enough. Because when I started this job, I was a job shared, and I had done a similar thing before, but I wasn't quite doing learning development. And so I wasn't quite sure what I was doing initially. It's like any job, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to emulate the person I was working with, and he was very much, there was 2 sides to the job. There was managing people's studies and time and timetables, and then looking at their writing, drafts of the writing or plans. And although I do all of those things, sometimes there's this other little bit in the middle, which is more, okay, let's just take a pause and really think about what you're doing. And then you're talking a lot more about someone's intentions. And I found that that's kind of become a thing over the last year or 2. And I think it's because people's timetables are so full, and the expectations are turnaround are really quick, because you can submit things online, and because we we do so much in the email and middle announcements, it feels very, very speedy. So when people don't reply or take a day or two, we get a bit anxious about not getting a response when actually maybe they're just processing things.
Yeah.
So I kind of went off awfully there, but yeah.
No, but it's important. Like so much of research and scholarship is thinking slowly. You know, slow research is needed, but there's no time, it feels sometimes to.
And I think that's exacerbated as well. So it's really great that we give students marking criteria and rubrics so they can see what they need to hit. But then what tends to happen is things get a bit formulaic. And then students miss out on their voice. And I know that we can't write in lab reports really in the same way in some subjects about voice, but it's their ideas and the way they've connected those ideas together. And I think sometimes I've noticed, I would say, you know, at least a quarter of my appointments, students don't bring any writing. They just want to talk about what they think they're going to do, how they might do it. And I'll just question them and help them figure it out. And then they actually go off and do it. So that's something that I think those two students over the last 2 years where I never actually saw any writing. And those were online as well, so they could have easily shared things with me. And that kind of, I kind of changed my thinking. Not that I was disappointed they never showed me anything, but it kind of changed my perceptions of student success and my success in this role.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's very easy to think that if someone comes to see a learning developer or comes to a scientific writing centre, that will correlate with an increase in a grade boundary or percentage points or something. And I don't think that's how it should be measured. We shouldn't be using those kind of metrics.
No, yeah.
And I think that just kind of verified's not the word, but verified for me that actually you can't measure someone's development because you might be having an impact on multiple things and it doesn't necessarily translate. It might just be more confidence for them. They might still get the same grades, they might get better, they might get worse, but maybe as an individual they're going to be more on time. And then that will require them to change their working practices to get better grades. One thing doesn't necessarily follow another.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like you were a bit of a guide for the students, you know, kind of a bit of an anchor maybe in the mess of it. Yeah.
I think so. And I mean, that's part of the ethos of learning development is about emancipatory practice and helping students navigate higher education and some of those processes. And I think, you know, people talk about universities being like a sausage factory, and I think there are times when it is just tick boxes and they have to jump through hoops. But actually, we want them to be independent learners. And I think I always thought that, but there are other things that students do that add to that. So I think that's definitely, I hadn't had a student before who'd never shown me anything.
Yeah, that's interesting, but they still did well. Yeah.
And the reason they'd been referred to me is because they hadn't done anything and they didn't know where to start.
Right.
And I know that student did actually succeed because then I sat on the stage at Christmas time and watched them graduate.
Yeah.
You know, so I know that they did do those things. It wasn't like they dropped off and didn't submit. They did submit. I watched them graduate and they had a good degree. They've got a great job. You know, so yeah.
Would you have any advice for anyone who is sort of mentoring people on their writing? That could be a supervisor or just informally. I mean, it's not an individualised thing with supervision, but more. Is there anything someone could do to kind of support their students?
That's a really good question. Meet them where they are, I think. It's very hard when you're an incredibly busy academic to have the time and the care for your students. And it might be that you only have an hour and it has to be a very quick meeting. And you'll have lots of wonderful ideas and they might have lots of ideas. And I guess it's just, and it can be very difficult to get to the point and then to make sure that you've covered the things the student wants to have covered. So I don't know, maybe some really good listening. I mean, academics are great, but some of them just don't listen. Because they've got 101 things to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just maybe if you've got an hour, just making sure that you have that little connection and you're just listening. And then that power dynamic is really difficult. So I don't know, I'm rubbish at advice. So.
Sorry, I gave you. We're going to solve all the problems.
I wish I could. I think it's just always just taking a pause to think about the person in front of you, and that your enthusiasm could crush them. Because they are you 15, 20 years before, 5, 10, 15, 20 years before, and that your experience is different to what their experience is. So it's just kind of listening, but then also, I don't know, being mindful that they might take a different amount of time to get to where you are and what you know about originality, criticality, etc. And that there might be periods where you have to be a little bit more of a guiding hand, and then other times when you can be absolutely, yep, do this, do that, do that. I don't know what the advice is. I'm not sure. I'm rubbish, don't ask me.
No, I don't think so. I think that sounds like a good piece of advice. Meeting the students where they are.
Meet the students where they are, maybe. Yeah. And also, I think it's very difficult because we have this system where we need to document every meeting, and it can feel like there needs to be specific progress, and actually that progress might be quite nuanced.
Yeah.
And to recognise that might be the case, and that actually dealing with doing posters, conferences and PhD is quite a lot.
Yes.
And it doesn't suit everyone.
No. I know. On top of that, not really earning a lot of money, you've got like all of the financial stresses, and then you're worried you're not good enough maybe as well. So,
Well, I mean, it's very hard because if you think about that power dynamic, so it's like undergraduates approaching people to do their dissertations, let's just ask an academic, say what? And then you look at their publishing record and you're like, I've got nothing to offer these people. It's really hard. That power dynamic is huge. And so I think being mindful of that there will be intimidation at times, but also accepting they will sometimes just come and seek and ask for short answers, and maybe they might need a bit of support at other times, I guess. Just being mindful that it's a tricky experience and it's individual.
Yeah,
I guess.
I think that's good advice.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of time pressure as well, isn't it? It sounds like almost like you need to slow down to meet the student, but it can be quite hard when you're on the go all the time.
And I think it's hard because there's always grants to apply for, there's always teaching to reorganise, there's also having your own life and our responsibilities. But we are working with human beings, and I think we need to be human and bring ourselves to work and meet the students where they are, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Check in maybe with yourself a bit.
Yeah,
I'd
say so.
I think that's great. Thank you. You can write a little book for it. So I wonder, we have some problems that we'd like, to ask, common writing problems, and your advice on what you could do. So some more advice from Louise. So firstly, the first problem that I think we get maybe a lot of students coming to the Scientific Writing Centre with is how to start writing. How do you get started on an essay that you feel completely overwhelmed with? And do you have any advice for those who might experience the same?
So I guess if you've got the essay question, and always just start with the keywords, and if you don't know what the question means, there's no way you're going to be able to answer it. So it's looking at that question, looking at the keywords, and use a bit of Wikipedia to find out basic concepts. And then do some general reading and think really carefully about, well, what are the things I have to answer in this question? Because a lot of feedback from lecturers is often, you haven't answered the question and you've included 50% material that we didn't ask for. If we ask you for A, we don't want to hear about B. You might mention B in passing, but we don't need big paragraphs about B. So what does it really need to be on? So I think to not underestimate some general writing. See if you can find some review papers, but make some notes about what are the keywords. So what things have to be in here? Is there certain elements that I need to read about and I need to look up? And if I don't really understand what they are, can I do some internet searching to find out basic ideas about them? And then that will help me find good literature. There's a tendency that students have to rush in and find 50 papers. And actually, students always ask that question, how many references should I have in this? And it's actually about really good references and good information that supports your argument. And also, you might be given a question that asks you to compare, say, two models, or whether that's like, two climate change models, or models of behaviour, or mathematical models. If you're asked a question that requires you to compare two things, pros and cons, and to make a judgment at the end, then you need to tell us something about each of those models. So find out about those models, but start basics so that you know what you're talking about. And then you can find some good quality articles to support your points. But two people will never answer the same question in the same way. And as long as you can be persuasive in your argument and you can put forward good reasoning, it doesn't matter whether you've read 25 papers or 50 papers. If it's about how you use those references. So just start calmly. It's easy to say that when you've got a time deadline, but look at those words in the question and what are they actually asking you. And then if you're not sure, come to the Scientific Writing Centre, or book an appointment with your learning developer, do both, and really think about, well, what things need to be in this question even before I understand what those words mean. If it's the benefits of A over B or whatever, what are the concepts I need to understand before I can even start writing an answer. And check those keywords as well, because it might be discussed, but it might want you to evaluate, and there's a difference about those words and whether they want you to make a recommendation at the end or not. So if you use those keywords, then you know that the last paragraph's going to have to say, so A is better than B.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I would say. I would also say don't panic, and that they're not trying to trip you up when they ask you to do assignments. I think that's the hardest thing to learn, is they're not trying to get rid of you. They're wanting to see what interesting information you can bring to an essay question.
Yeah.
And they're wanting you to do well. Everything comes from a place of wanting you to do well. This isn't about cutting people out all the way through their degree. They want you to do well, so you just need to not panic.
A similar question in a sense, but how does someone write an introduction of a lab report or an essay? Is there anything you would advise?
So I kind of think about writing bottom up when it comes to kind of introductions. So the introduction to an essay and the introduction to a lab report, they're related, slightly different but related. So when you do a lab report, you're obviously, usually, when you do a lab report, you're usually writing up something that you have physically undertaken, or you'll have been given data for you to analyse as if you've collected it. So the report is to tell the reader what you did, and the introduction part is to set the scene about why you're doing what you're doing. So in a lab report, the methods tends to be the easiest bit to write because it's what you actually did, or you're given the methodology, and the results are however you want to present the data that you've collected, whether that be quotes qualitatively or whether it be numbers quantitatively. So for the introduction, that introduction has to narrow down to effectively a sentence, which you won't necessarily write. Therefore, we're going to look at the effects of A on B using such and such, and this is how we're going to do it. So it might be easier sometimes to work bottom up in an introduction and think about, well, I need to get to this point here. This is the aim of the study, or this is the aim of this experiment was to determine the effect of X on Y. So therefore, what does my reader need to know before that to get to that point? So what is the real world problem here, or what is the issue, and how do I get between those 2 points? And it kind of narrows down. So, and often you'll write your introduction and your discussion maybe at the same time because you need some literature to put in. So what is the problem? What is the motivation for this kind of study? Why would we want to do it? And therefore, what's the kind of aim, the overall aim, hypothesis, research question, or whatever. For an essay, it's a little bit different in that the main body will have sections on using the keywords and the things that you need to compare and contrast. So the introduction to the essay will still have a bit of those generalised sentences about, racism is a problem in America, or, climate change is an issue, or bird species in response to climate change have been declining. And you still kind of need to narrow down through your introduction. It's just you do it in a similar way, but it's probably not as formulaic, and you kind of need to highlight at the start of an introduction as well in an essay what your viewpoint is going to be. So this essay is going to discuss about why, you know, A is better than B or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes as well, when you're writing an introduction, people think you have to write the introduction first and power through, but actually you should probably really do things a bit more patchwork. So you make a draft structure, whether it's an essay or a report, and then you think about what needs to go in each section. So in a lab report, you'll have some form of introduction, methods, results, discussion, and you can note down what's going to go in each. And your introduction has to give the context, and has to give the motivation and the aims. In an essay, it's similar. You've got your main body in the middle, but if your keyword says critically evaluate, then the last paragraph is clearly going to be some justification why something is better than another. And then the introduction is clearly going to be introducing the issue and then signposting what the essay is going to be about. And again, it's, unless you're one of those special people, it's very hard to write that linearly, go straight from introduction through to conclusion. Because also, as you're writing your essay, you're going to come across other bits of work that might inform those different sections.
Yeah.
And I think people think that they do write start to finish, but it's actually more certain sections might be generated at different times, and then you put the whole thing together, which is why you have to give yourself plenty of time. I don't know if that answered that question.
It did. It was great. Yeah. It's almost a bit like what you were saying earlier about thinking as being kind of the precursor to writing.
Yeah.
So maybe if you thought about things a lot, your introduction will flow. But generally, if you think you're just going to sit down, you probably might want to start with methodology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could be that, you know, for a lot of students when they've got assignments, you know, they've probably had a few lectures on why we're looking at what we're looking at. So the introduction section might be quite easy to write, formulaic way, but then actually they need to go back and finesse it and add more literature in and really think about how they're going to get to the question.
Yeah.
And sometimes with an essay it's a wee bit harder than a lab report, because in a lab report there's definitely something you're measuring or something that you're specifically looking for, whereas an essay tends to be tell us why you think A is better than B, or what is the relationship, or how would you explain one model over another, or, you know, using evidence. And it feels like mini essays almost within one big essay, so depends on what they said.
Many layers to it, isn't there?
Many layers.
If only it was easy.
If only it was.
Well, it's a bit, as you say also, that it's formulaic, isn't it? I think so.
Yeah.
I think once you get into the hang of it a bit, you can kind of understand what people expect from an introduction.
And I think as well, depending on your subject area too, about what constitutes an essay in one topic, one subject area compared to another.
Definitely. And another thing about academic writing is that it's often got to be quite clear and succinct. And some people may struggle with that. Would you have any advice on how to make it clear or succinct?
So sometimes people feel that they need to use lots of fancy language, and you definitely need to use the correct terminology for your research area, but you need to read it out loud, and that's something that I think works really well for students. And you know, you put in a breath after a full stop, and if you read it out loud or get someone to read it to you and hear the length of your sentences, you'll naturally hear what you need to put breaks in. And there are some subject areas which they tend to have a lot longer sentences than others, and then if the sentence goes too long over too many lines, you're going to lose your reader. So the best way I often find is reading out loud and then thinking, actually, does that sentence say what I wanted to say? So there's different editing techniques. You can look at your topic sentence and your paragraph and check that your paragraph is going to be about that point, and then look how many sentences you've got, read them out loud, and if you're having to take a breath in between a sentence, it's too long. But also, if you're very abrupt, you've got to be careful as well that you don't make your sentences too short. And if you've gone and just used a thesaurus to add loads of fancy words, then you're probably on the wrong track. And the other thing to do is not write it as if you're chatting, but you can write things relatively simple and then read them and think, well, that would sound better. And there's lots of different resources you can use that can help you with sentence construction, things like the Academic Phrase Bank. And there's also different verbs that you can use within that they show you different modal verbs in terms of how we talk about how work was undertaken, and that can be quite useful. That's particularly good in lab reports. But yeah, the conciseness, if you're running out of breath when you're reading your paragraphs, your writing's too long.
That's a very good bit of advice.
And it could just be that you've written at stream of consciousness and you've forgotten to put any punctuation in. But also be very careful, because it happens a lot in science about the size of our paragraphs. And sometimes we end up doing one paragraph, which is one sentence. Just be very mindful of that. That's quite common in certain areas of maths. But again, it isn't easy then for the reader.
No.
So it's looking at it how it looks as a shape on the page, but also reading it out loud. And it's a combination of the two that makes you go, actually, that would fit better. And sometimes with the flow, just checking for your paragraph structure in essays, if you've got a topic sentence and you've got a mini conclusion or a wrap or a connection at the bottom of the paragraph, and that evidence in the middle, make sure that those evidence in the middle aren't just like, one massive sentence with lots of evidence in it, that you break it up.
Yeah, so kind of bear the reader in mind when you're writing it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So become the reader yourself, in a sense.
Yeah, and that's why you have to leave time. So when you're writing something, it's good to just put it face down and leave it for a day, or shut your laptop, and then go back to it with the intention of reading only, not editing, but maybe making notes to yourself, this bit's too long, but not make the edits then. Go back and make the edits.
Yeah.
So you've got to change your shoes.
Yes. That's good. So
Or your hats.
Yeah, shoes on your hat, yeah. Probably a bit of a more formulaic one, but I suppose if you've had people coming to you with problems with their dissertation, what's been the most sort of common problem, would you say?
Oh, for the dissertations. So the most common problem is often they'll set out aims in objectives, in an aims and objectives section, and then they don't answer them.
Okay.
So it's really common that students won't link what they've done back to their aims and objectives, because the distance from coming up with the ideas for the dissertation, whether or not they're told by their supervisors or they've applied for a project or they've come up with something themselves, you come up with research questions, hypotheses or aims and objectives, and then you undertake some work somehow, qualitative or quantitatively, to answer those questions. And then often what happens in the discussion section, students never refer back to their aims, or the aims that they talk about are not the ones that they said at the start.
Yeah.
And they don't link what they've done with the introduction and the discussion sections. And sometimes that happens because students will know their aims and objectives, and so they'll kind of have written the introduction, but they don't go back. And they don't give themselves enough time to make sure that the whole document flows together. And it can be something as simple as just getting the 2 pages up of the end of your introduction and the start of your discussion, and bullet pointing to remind yourself, this is what my aims were. Have I actually answered those aims? And that often happens, that the chapters become so individual themselves, students forget to connect them all up together.
Yeah.
And that you can say, as discussed in chapter 3, you can explicitly say, the previous chapter talked about this. I mean, obviously you'd write it a bit more finessed, but the previous chapter talked about this. This chapter is going to build on that and talk about the next thing. You can actually put those things in and help your reader.
Yeah.
And it's just making those connections, and them not being so isolated, but having an overall flow. Students often forget what on earth the overarching aim of their research was. Why am I doing this? I'm not sure. How does that connect to this? And what have you proven by that chapter? So therefore, how does that influence the next chapter? And then how does that make the whole thing sit together?
Yeah, it's almost like you go so specific in your dissertation that you probably need to go back out again to see how does it connect to that bigger picture, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's sometimes what students forget to do. And it can be very difficult if you've got a very unexpected result and you're not quite sure how to link that back to what you did. But every negative result is a positive result in science because it tells you something. So, it doesn't matter if you're doing it qualitatively and you find that there's something that people just haven't considered, that gives you information that you can then work on. And the same with data. there might be something that you get no significant results whatsoever. Well, what does that tell you? Is there something about your methodology, or is something more complex that you need to think of a different way to do some detection?
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard, because you then feel it's not a good piece of work because you've got nothing solid, but actually you do have some solid results, and there's probably good reason as to why you have or haven't seen or detected something.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fabricate something to be, it's not your fault, is it?
No, absolutely. And it could be that you've used a complete wrong methodology. Well, that's you could talk about that in your discussion and say this was absolutely the wrong thing to do. But I now know that, and then this is what we would do. I mean, you wouldn't write it like that because that's a bit chatty, but fundamentally that's what you would discuss.
Yeah. And I'm just going to read out a quote written by Nan Shepherd in her book The Living Mountain, which is also cited by Robert Macfarlane. And the quote is, "Often the mountain gives itself most completely when I have no destination, when I reach nowhere in particular, but have gone out merely to be with the mountain, as one visits a friend, with no intention but to be with him." So thank you, Louise, for coming on the podcast. It's been so lovely to speak to you, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Sophie.
This podcast has been produced with Lancaster University's Learning Development Team, which are based at Lancaster University Library. With special thanks to Dr. Louise Innes and Dr. Beth Caldwell for their support for this podcast. I'd also like to thank the other scientific writing mentors who have supported this podcast. The Scientific Writing Centre is a place where any undergraduate student from the Faculty of Science and Technology or the Faculty of Health and Medicine can discuss their scientific writing with a trained postgraduate scientific writing mentor. The Scientific Writing Centre is not a class or a course, it's a one-to-one appointment, which takes place on campus in C130 in the library. Appointments can last up to 45 minutes. To find out more, please go to www.lancaster.ac.uk/library/learn.